Donald Trump's dark past continues to surface as the web of Epstein's financing continues to be exposed. And we see perhaps another reason why Donald Trump was so keen on acquiring CBS via his right-wing oligarch buds to shut down important investigations into the Epstein files. Hat tip to Aaron Parnas, who's been on the front lines investigating the Epstein cover-up. Hat tip to Katie Fang. I mean, a true living hero, Katie Fang, fighting for Epstein transparency for the Epstein survivors. And I want to give a hat tip to Jason Leopold over at Bloomberg, who's done a very good job with the FOIA requests and bringing transparency to Trump's cover-up. All great people. I want to give them all credit at the outset. Follow the money. How Wall Street bankrolled and how the Trump administration and CBS are blocking the truth about Epstein, how they bankrolled Epstein. Deutsche Bank failed to promptly report to U.S. authorities more than $250 million in suspicious transactions tied to Jeffrey Epstein, including funds used to pay women in Russia and other Eastern European countries, according to a new report from Senator Ron Wyden. Jason Leopold is also reporting. We should also point out here that there was at least one bank recently in a court filing when Donald Trump sued them for debanking him that said that the reason why Trump was, quote unquote, debanked was because of suspicious activity reports and because it was flagged for violating, not Trump directly, but that it was flagged for violating internal controls that it had for suspicious accounts. And where certain flags were triggered, this bank said, we have to debank you, not to suggest or say that it automatically means that you are directly involved in money laundering, but that the bank itself has obligations to not facilitate accounts that have certain benchmarks that could be used for it. And that was one of the defenses to the bank that Trump was suing, saying, oh, you debanked me because I'm conservative. Like, ain't because you're conservative. It would debanking you because of what the red flags were. But here, we're seeing Deutsche Bank fail to promptly report to U.S. authorities separately these $250 million in suspicious transactions. Bank of America didn't report millions of dollars in suspicious Epstein-related transactions connected to two billionaires, Leon Black, including two unusual wires and others that did not have a verifiable business purpose and no apparent economic, business, or lawful purpose until 5 to 7 years after they took place, according to Wyden's 67-page report. These allegations, based on reviews of non-public records held by the Treasury Department, are detailed in Wyden's report. Looking the other way, how Wall Street banks enable Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking. The document describes the lawmakers' multi-year investigation into Epstein's financial network. The report also says Wyden was interviewed about his investigation in March by then 60 Minutes correspondent Sharon Alfonsi. For a segment, the news program was reporting about Wall Street banks and the U.S. Virgin Islands government's relationship with Epstein. 2 months later, CBS News fired Alfonsi after she publicly criticized CBS leadership and editor-in-chief Barry Weiss's editorial decisions involving a different segment she reported on. Neither the Wyden interview nor the broader Epstein story was ever aired. A spokesperson for CBS News confirmed that Alfonsi had interviewed Wyden for a potential segment in March, but said the full story did not come together for airing during the 60-minute season that concluded in May. The spokesperson, though, would not comment on any plans for the program's next season. Wyden intends to introduce legislation that would impose tougher penalties on banks and individual bankers who fail to swiftly report suspicious activity involving high-risk clients, according to the report. His proposed bill would require greater accountability for wealth management executives, including annual certifications from senior bank officials that ultra-high net worth clients have undergone proper monitoring and enhanced due diligence. Federal law requires banks to notify the Treasury's Financial Crime Division. I laugh because, the Treasury's Financial Crime Division right now, under Besson, sure, within 60 days of detecting suspicious transactions. Maybe you want to check the Treasury ledger for those suspicious transactions because a lot of that market manipulation is coming right from that building and from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Each of the three banks ultimately filed such notices, known as suspicious activity reports or SARs, about Epstein, but most were filed only retroactively after the disgraced financer was arrested. Wyden staff reviewed SARs showing that Deutsche Bank retroactively flagged $250 million in suspicious wire transfers flowing in and out of Epstein's accounts after he was arrested on sex trafficking charges in July 2019. One of the bank's SARs identified 1,140 wire transfers between 2013 and 2019, totaling $147 million. Deutsche Bank became Epstein's bank after he was dropped by JP Morgan in 2013, roughly 5 years after his initial guilty plea. Deutsche Bank declined to comment. A spokesperson for B of A said, "We take our legal and regulatory responsibilities very seriously. And as we previously said, the bank did not facilitate wrongdoing." JP Morgan said in a statement it began filing reports to regulators about suspicious transactions involving Epstein in 2002. Let's bring in Harry Litman. Harry Litman, you and I have both litigated cases against banks. And I litigated cases against banks back when I was a litigator. I no longer practice. But where banks would be held liable for not filing suspicious activity reports, where they would aid and abet money laundering, where they would aid and abet Ponzi schemes and other suspicious activity. I mean, the MedCap case that I did in California back in 2014, 2015, I think banks were on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars in facilitating transactions that they could have flagged. So, to me, what's interesting is not just the story about these suspicious activity reports about Epstein, the $250 million, which is certainly a lot of money, although I personally believe that's probably the tip of the iceberg. The CBS cover-up component here is important, but this happens the same week where finally banks are fighting back against Trump and saying, we didn't debank you because you're Trump. We debanked you because we literally have an obligation and we're going to get sued and we're liable if we didn't do that. We're obligated by federal law to do what we did. And now you're going to sue us and whine. And when we hear, Harry, all of these people whining, oh, you debanked me because I'm this, you debanked me because of that. No, the world that they want, Harry, is the world we see now, where you have these right-wing oligarchs running amok, manipulating markets, and God knows what the hell is happening in those bank accounts right now. But if what we see is the tip of the iceberg, what's going on behind the scenes at the country clubs where the Epstein class hangs out is certainly very, very concerning, Harry Litman.
At least that. Look, you're totally right. I've done a lot of these cases, Ben, as a prosecutor. And it's really, you see this story again and again that some schnook, structures transactions, is caught, goes to jail. I've done those cases. But that some really, really rich guy has a personal relationship and kind of works it. And then, oh, I'm a little short. Oh, really? Did I? But gets the bank or a particular banker on the hook. And then they're kind of stuck, and get sort of strung along. And it's ironically the richest clients who wind up really making banks liable. But let's start here. If he's not president of the United States and you have, say, one strike as a bank for a customer you won't take, you gotta use it on Donald Trump. Here's a guy who we know doesn't like to pay, sues right and left, goes bankrupt repeatedly, cheats in terms of what information he provides in order to get unfairly low or high, depending on if he's trying to get pay less taxes or get better rates from banks. This guy is an inveterate shyster, and that banks deal with him at all is something of a miracle. Except now he browbeats and he does all this other stuff, and you have banks being so stupid. And by the way, I gotta imagine this story is yet to be written fully, really delving into Epstein and the money, but you're going to see something similar. We've seen just again and again some way he had of infiltrating his way, either charm or greasing palms or whatever, but into the lives of really prominent people who did him favors and now are running for cover as soon as it's, and we're talking about really high end bankers and lawyers and all kinds of people in a story that hasn't been told. I agree. Hats off to Barnes. And there's a lot here. In general, it feels to me like, does this connect with that and that with the third? It's sprawling. And as you say, there's sort of overlap of time. This is what you have to go into more. But there was a day when I would have read something like this and said, here's an overly suspicious reporter or just trying to, bring up something that isn't there. But I'm sorry, Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, what kind of bad assumption can you not countenance when you're talking about these guys? The ruthlessness, the criminality, the instinct to cover up at all costs. And so, yeah, you can really see how, and that's the other thing about this stuff when banks, blow it and make mistakes and then have to run. It's so often so stupid. It's so obvious and in front of their eyes in retrospect. But that sort of is, isn't it? The Jeffrey Epstein story now. All these people, 2 days ago, Dr. Fauci, right? It's just like, things come out and they're completely mortified, but that's the story. And, we haven't even been able to scratch the surface of what he did with all the women and girls that he victimized, the money part, the island, the parties, the donations to charity. That's a huge part of how Epstein got away with it. Like, all kinds of hustlers in the past, but that's a big story to be uncovered and told. And yeah, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we are in, days, the counter adages, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not really out to get you. You certainly got my attention when you said Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, CBS, and there's it really stands to reason that there were people there doing stuff that they now don't want the American people to know. And once you get, this is my sort of final point here, once you get into these really convoluted, intricate money things, I've had days where I spent, the whole day and just at 7 p.m. wanted to say, oh man, I don't know if I know any more than I did before. They are very sophisticated in sort of moving things around and the like. But somewhere at the core is someone, who just green-lighted a fraud, or Trump who just lied, or Epstein who sold somebody a bill of goods. And, that's going to be the work of several lifetime biographers or historians to get to the bottom of the tangled web that Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump wove.
2 points. Number one, if you think about the Trump regime as a series, a really horrific series, and I don't mean to conflate a series that I enjoy with a horrific series that is Trump, but if you think about the Star Wars initial trilogy, and then you go back in time to the origins of all of this, like how the dark side became the dark side, right. The reality is that this Epstein stuff and the way Epstein moved money is remarkably indicative of the habits and the patterns that we see pronounced now that take place in the Oval Office. So I just want to say that, like, you go, oh, it's like Baby Yoda. It's like, it's like the training grounds for what was to basically become for these very, for the way financial stuff is handled. And I'm like, whoa, there's so many similarities there. Also, when we talk about the things that have not been turned over in the Epstein Transparency Act, there are all these adjacent investigations that have just been deemed, just because by the Trump's DOJ not to fall within the ambit of the Epstein Transparency Act. So they've pretty much narrowly said, got it. Just the sex trafficking case of Epstein here and the Ghislaine case, that's what we'll produce. But then they didn't produce millions of documents. The broader issue is they were investigating him for money laundering and these financial crimes. And those are not even considered in the universe of documents that are being withheld. They just basically said that's not what's required in the act. And so what I want to know is the broader money laundering investigation. And that is probably terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of documents because of all of the people Epstein was involved in. Those are those tedious financial records that you and I would look at as litigators. And then to me, one of the crucial things about the Trump-Epstein relationship was that home in Palm Beach that the Russian oligarch eventually purchased from Trump, that Trump bought from one of their Palm Beach billionaire friends who was going bankrupt on paper, that Epstein said that he was going to buy, that Trump bought from underneath Epstein, and then a few years later doubled or tripled the price by giving it to this Russian oligarch. And in a lot of the Epstein emails, Epstein even flags that transaction. And so the guy was Gossman who sold it. And the Russian oligarch was like one of Putin's top people. I want to know about that stuff. And to me, that is where my spidey sense as a litigator goes. That's where it's at. And, it's going to be our job and Katie Fang and Aaron Parnas and Jason Leopold and others to get it. Harry.
And there you have it. And I just want to say, look, I'm a prosecutor. I believe in guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but I also believe in investigation and thorough investigation. There is a lot of splaining to do, and it's not just about what crimes occurred. How did this guy pray the whole spider web of crimes, sexual, financial, maybe fraud? That's something that we have a right to know. And you're totally right. It's going to take someone. I'm thinking of David Farenhold, who did such a good job with the post on Trump's taxes, just really trudge through a lot of records, but that's where it is. And, this was a big eyesore for society, not just Todd Blanche or Donald Trump or Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein, all the victims, etc. And getting to the bottom, it almost always, in my experience, involves the interrelationship of, for example, sexual crimes and money. And man, oh man, whoever can start to crack that wall, hats are off to them, but it's just a morass, but a morass that it really means something to try to understand.
Everybody subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. It's called Talking Feds. Search Talking Feds on YouTube. Go watch some of Harry's videos and put in the comments, WTF America, Harry. That's the book I wrote with my brothers. Comes out in October. Pre-order it now. And let Harry know if you purchased it. But subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. It's called Talking Feds. Thanks, Harry.
Hey, thanks, man.
And subscribe here as well.
Hey, if you want the full story, how democracy got here and how we take it back, pre-order our new book, WTF America, today. Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description. Let's do this.